My name is Catherine Marsh. I am 61 years old. I am going to tell you a story that most mothers who tell stories don't tell. Not because it is shameful, though parts of it are. Not because I have resolved it cleanly, because I have not. But because it is true, and I have spent 6 years learning that the only thing I can offer my daughter that has any value at all is the truth, and she is not speaking to me, and the truth has to go somewhere. My daughter's name is Addie. She is 34 years old. She has not spoken to me since a Sunday in September 6 years ago, when she called me on the phone and told me, in the specific direct way she has always communicated, when she has made a decision she has thought through completely, that she needed distance and that she was going to take it, and that she would reach out when and if she was ready. She has not reached out. I have called her 11 times across 6 years. The calls go to voicemail. I have sent 12 letters. I do not know if she has read them. I have sent birthday cards and Christmas cards and one card on the anniversary of her father's death, because I thought she might need something on that day, and I wanted her to know I was thinking about her. I do not know if she received them. I know she is alive and well because her brother Marcus, who is 31, and who remains in contact with both of us in the specific difficult position of a child caught between two estranged family members, tells me she is alive and well when I ask, and I do not ask more than that, because asking more than that would cost Marcus something, and Marcus has already paid enough by being the only thread connecting me to information about my daughter. I am going to tell you what led to the Sunday in September. I am going to tell it accurately, which means I am going to tell it in a way that is uncomfortable for me, and that will probably surprise people who know me in the version of me that exists in my public life, which is a version in which I am competent and warm and well-regarded and apparently capable of genuine relationships. I am all of those things. I was also a specific kind of mother to Addie across the first 28 years of her life, and the specific kind of mother I was is the reason for the Sunday in September, and understanding the reason requires describing the kind, and describing the kind requires honesty I have been practicing for 6 years, and am still not entirely comfortable with. Before I read you the letter I wrote her last month, let me take you back to the beginning. Not the Sunday in September. The beginning. The specific place where I first made the choices that eventually produced the Sunday in September, not through any single decision but through the specific accumulation of small decisions that add up, across 28 years, to something a daughter eventually names and walks away from. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, the oldest of 3 daughters born to Harold and Frances Whitfield, who were, in the specific way of a certain kind of Southern professional family, people who understood that the primary obligation of a woman in their world was to be managed, by which I mean to present a specific, carefully constructed surface that communicated stability and competence and grace, and that did not reveal the specific texture underneath that surface, which was allowed to be whatever it was as long as it stayed underneath. I absorbed this as the atmosphere of my childhood without ever being taught it explicitly, the way you absorb language by being immersed in it rather than by studying its grammar. I learned, not through any single lesson, but through the specific accumulated osmosis of growing up in the Whitfield household, that feelings were private, that difficulty was not discussed with the people the difficulty was about, that problems were managed rather than addressed, and that the specific art of maintaining appearances was not hypocrisy, but dignity. I became very good at this. I became so good at it that it became my primary relationship to myself, the specific mode I inhabited not only with the world, but with my own interior experience, managing and maintaining rather than receiving and addressing. I married Robert Marsh at 27, a man who was kind and specific, and who loved me genuinely, and who was also, because of who I was when I chose him and what I had learned to look for, someone whose own conflict avoidance created a specific partnership in which the managing and maintaining became the ambient condition of our marriage rather than an occasional practice. We had 2 children, Addie in 1991, Marcus in 1994. I was a devoted mother in the specific way that mothers who are skilled managers are devoted, attending to every logistical requirement of my children's lives with the focused efficiency of someone for whom care expressed through management was the only form of care I had fully developed. What I was less skilled at was the other kind. The kind that requires receiving what someone is actually expressing, rather than managing what they are expressing toward an acceptable outcome. The kind that requires sitting with discomfort rather than resolving it. The kind that requires honesty about your own experience as a prerequisite for genuine connection with another person's. Addie knew this about me before I did. She has always been more perceptive than almost anyone I have known in my life, with the specific quality of perception that arrives in some children who grow up paying close attention to a parent who is not fully present in the way that the child needs them to be present. The hyper-perceptiveness of the child who learns to read everything, because the surface is not telling the full story. She tried to reach me across her childhood and adolescence in ways I did not fully understand were reaching until long after. She came to me with things she was feeling, things she was confused about, things she needed talked through rather than resolved. I responded to these overtures the way I had learned to respond to all difficult things, which was with the specific competence of someone who was going to manage the situation toward a better outcome. I did not understand, for most of Addie's childhood, that what she was offering me was not a problem to be managed. It was an invitation to a relationship, and I was declining the invitation every time I managed instead of receiving. She stopped offering by the time she was in high school, not dramatically, with the specific quiet withdrawal of someone who has been declined enough times that offering has become not worth the cost of the declining. She was not cold to me. She was correct. She maintained the surface, having been raised to maintain it, and she kept the texture under the surface away from me because I had communicated, not through anything I said but through everything I did, that the texture was not something I was capable of receiving. She went to college in Boston, came back to Richmond for a year after graduation, then moved to Denver. The distance felt natural because we had been in a specific kind of distance for years before she moved. Her father died when Addie was 26. Robert had a cardiac event, the specific sudden kind that gives no warning, and he died in the hospital within hours. Addie flew home from Denver. She was with me at the hospital at the end. She held my hand in the waiting room when the doctor came to tell us. What happened in the year after Robert died is the specific year that I want to describe carefully, because it is the year when everything that had been managing itself on the surface reached a level of cost that the surface could no longer absorb. I grieved the way I had learned to grieve things that were difficult, which was by managing the grief rather than experiencing it, by organizing the logistics of death and estate and paperwork and social obligation, rather than sitting in the specific weight of what had been lost. I was efficient and competent, and I kept everything organized, and I said the right things at the right times, and I presented a surface that communicated that I was handling it. Addie flew back to Denver 4 weeks after the funeral. Before she left, we had a conversation in the kitchen of the house where she had grown up, and in that conversation, she said something to me that I want to reproduce as accurately as I can, because it is the first time she said directly what she had been unable to say before. She said, "Mom, are you okay?" And I don't mean, "Are you managing?" I mean, "Are you okay?" I said the specific thing I had been saying her entire life when she asked me things that required more than the surface, which was a reassurance that did not address the question. I said, "I'm doing as well as can be expected. I'm taking it one day at a time." She looked at me for a long moment. She said, "I know that's true." I also know that's not an answer. I said, "Addie, I appreciate you asking." She said, "Mom." I said, "I'm going to be fine. Don't worry about me." She left the following day. She was worried about me. I could not receive the worry. The year after Robert died was the year I had what I eventually understood was a significant depression, not the diagnosable clinical kind that produces specific symptoms visible enough to require intervention, but the specific kind that a person who has spent their entire life managing their interior experience develops when the thing they are experiencing becomes too large to manage, and they do not know another way to be in relation to it. I functioned. I kept the house. I went to work. I maintained the surface in all the specific ways the surface required maintaining. Inside the managed surface, I was drowning in a way I did not have the vocabulary to describe even to myself. Addie called weakly. I said the things I said. She heard the things I was not saying, and she did not know how to get through the surface to them, partly because I had spent her entire childhood communicating that the surface was the access point, and partly because she had her own grief that I was equally unable to receive. And so our calls had the specific quality of two people reaching for each other through a wall that neither of us had built, but that both of us were maintaining. She came home for Christmas that year. We spent 4 days together in the house where she had grown up, and where I was alone now. The 4 days had a specific quality that I understood differently later, which was that Addie was trying, in specific ways across those 4 days, to actually reach me, to break through the surface to something real, and that I was doing the specific thing I had always done, which was to manage the attempts toward resolution, rather than receive them. On the last night she was home, Christmas night, we were in the kitchen after dinner, and she said, "Mom, I need to tell you something, and I need you to actually hear it." I said, "Of course." She said, "I feel like I've been talking to you my whole life, and you've never actually heard me. I don't mean you don't listen. I mean when I tell you something real, you respond to it in a way that I can tell you're managing it, rather than receiving it, and I don't know how to get through that, and I need you to know that it costs me something every time." I said, "Addie, I hear you. I'll try to do better." She looked at me. She said, "Mom, what I just told you is that I feel unheard." And you responded by saying you'll try to do better, which is a management response. "Do you understand what I mean?" I said, "I'm trying to understand." She said, "I know." She left the next morning. The Sunday in September came 8 months later. She called at 2 in the afternoon. Her voice had the specific quality I have come to recognize as the voice of someone who has made a decision they have thought through completely, and who is calling to communicate the decision rather than to discuss it. She said, "Mom, I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I want to tell you directly rather than letting it just become the way things are." I said, "Okay." She said, "I need distance." I've needed it for a long time, and I've been avoiding naming it because naming it felt too dramatic and too final, but not naming it has been costing me more than naming it will. I said, "Addie." She said, "Please let me finish." I said, "Yes, I'm sorry." She said, "The relationship we have is one where I come to you and I share something real and you manage me toward feeling better, and then nothing has actually been said between us. I have needed a mother who could receive what I was bringing to her, and I have spent my whole life bringing it and not having it received. And I have finally gotten to the point where I understand that this is not something I can change by trying harder." She said, "I'm not calling to blame you. I've done my own work on why I kept trying when the pattern was clear, but I need to stop now. I need distance, real distance, for my own health, and I'm calling to tell you rather than to just do it." I said, "Addie, I want to understand. Can you help me understand what I've done that made you feel?" She said, "Mom, I want you to hear what you just said. I told you I need distance because our relationship has not been able to be real, and your response was to ask me to help you understand what you've done so that you can fix it. Do you hear that?" I was quiet. She said, "I love you. I am going to take the distance I need. I'll reach out when I'm ready." She hung up. Let me stop here for a moment. I have told you this story up to this point in the mode that I know how to tell stories, which is the competent mode, the managed mode, the mode in which the story is organized and paced and structured. I want to stop and say something directly to you that is outside the structure. I was wrong. For 28 years, I was wrong in a specific way that cost my daughter something she should not have had to pay. Not wrong in the dramatic sense of having committed any single terrible act. Wrong in the specific way that people are wrong when they have never developed the capacity that the people they love need most from them, and when they mistake the absence of capacity for the presence of a different and equivalent capacity. I managed my daughter when she needed to be received. I organized her toward resolution when she needed to be accompanied into the difficulty. I presented the surface when she needed the texture. And I did all of this not from malice and not from indifference, but from the specific limitation of someone who had been taught since childhood that the surface was the safest place to live, and who had never learned to live anywhere else. If you are listening to this and you are a mother, I want to ask you something. Not the version of the question that produces a comfortable answer. The actual question. When your child comes to you with something real, something difficult, something that is not organized or resolvable, do you receive it, or do you manage it toward resolution? Drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from and what time it is there. Because what I wrote to my daughter last month is the specific thing I want to leave you with, and I want you to understand fully what preceded it before you hear it. If you have not subscribed yet, please do. 6 years of distance have taught me what 28 years of mothering did not teach me. They have taught me through the specific medium of loss, which is the most thorough teacher available. They have taught me through the professional help I finally sought in the year after Addie stopped speaking to me. Therapy of the specific kind that I had resisted for most of my adult life, because seeking it would have required admitting that the surface was not the whole story. They have taught me through the work I have done in those therapy sessions to understand what I learned in the Whitfield household and how I carried it forward into every relationship of my adult life and what it cost each of those relationships, and specifically what it cost Addie. They have taught me through the specific grief of reading the books I finally read about emotional availability and attachment and what children need from parents, and finding on page after page descriptions of my own behavior and language I could not have generated myself, but that I recognized instantly as accurate. They have taught me through the specific experience of missing my daughter for 6 years in the way that you miss someone who is alive and present somewhere in the world, and who has decided that your presence in their life is not something they can sustain, the particular grief of an absence that is chosen rather than circumstantial. I want to be specific about what I have learned because the specificity is the only thing that might matter. I have learned that managing someone is not the same as loving them. Managing is about the manager's comfort with the situation. Love is about the other person's experience of being received. I had confused these for most of my life. I have learned that the capacity to sit with someone's difficult emotion without immediately moving to resolve it is a skill, one that requires development rather than natural availability, and that the absence of this skill in a parent produces a specific deprivation in a child that the child experiences as not being fully seen. I have learned that saying I'll try to do better in response to being told that I never receive what someone is bringing to me is the specific and exact version of not receiving what someone is bringing to me. The person needed to be heard. I offered a management response. I have learned that the distance Addie took was not punishment and was not overreaction. It was the specific necessary action of someone who had been trying to reach me for 28 years and who had finally understood, clearly and without drama, that reaching me was not possible within the existing terms of the relationship, and who chose herself. I have learned to respect this choice while also grieving it. Both things are simultaneously true, and neither one cancels the other. I have been writing to her across 6 years, and I have not received responses. Last month, I wrote her a different kind of letter. Not a letter that explained or organized or managed toward anything. A letter that tried, for the first time, to simply say what is true without managing it toward a purpose. I want to read you that letter now. Dear Addie, I am not going to ask anything of you in this letter. I want to say that first because I know that every letter I have sent you across 6 years has had something asked of it, some request for understanding or response or reconciliation, and I know that asking has been part of why the letters have not been able to be what they should have been. I have spent 6 years trying to understand what happened between us. Not in the way I used to try to understand things, which was to organize the understanding toward a resolution. In a different way. The slow, unglamorous, uncomfortable way of someone who is learning to see something clearly for the first time after a lifetime of looking away from it. What I understand now is this. You needed a mother who could receive you. From the time you were very small, you came to me with your interior life, the things you were feeling and confused about and afraid of and excited by, and I responded to each offering with the specific management that I had learned was the appropriate response to difficult things. I organized you toward feeling better. I resolved what you brought me rather than receiving it. I did this not because I did not love you, but because receiving was something I had never learned to do, and I did not know I had not learned it, because managing felt so similar to caring that I could not feel the difference from inside it. You could feel the difference. You have always been able to feel the difference between being managed and being received, and the difference told you something across the years of your childhood and adolescence and early adulthood that I was not saying in words, which was that what you brought me was too much, or the wrong shape, or not something I could hold. I want to tell you that was never true. What you brought me was never too much. It was the right shape. It was exactly what a mother should be able to hold. I was not able to hold it because I had not built that capacity. I had built a different capacity, the capacity to manage and maintain and present a surface that communicated care, while the actual care I was capable of offering was organized around my own comfort with your experience rather than your experience itself. I understand why you left. I understood it in the months after September, when I was still trying to understand it in the managing way, and I understand it differently now, in the way I am learning to understand things, which is without immediately moving to resolve the understanding. You left because you finally named something true about what had been happening between us, and I responded by asking you to help me understand what I had done, which was the specific exact version of what you had named. You told me I managed rather than received, and my response was to ask you to help me fix it, which was managing your telling me I managed. You heard it. I didn't hear it. Not in that moment. I hear it now. I am not telling you this because I want you to respond. I am telling you because the truth deserves to be said even when the person you are saying it to may not be there to receive it. You taught me that receiving matters even when the receiving costs something. I am learning to practice it. I do not know if the distance between us will change. I do not know if you will read this or whether reading it will matter. I am not managing this letter toward any outcome. I am writing it because I am trying, for the first time in my life, to say something true without organizing it toward what I want the true thing to do. What is true is this. I love you. I have always loved you. The love I was able to give you across your childhood was limited in ways that were not your fault and that cost you something you should not have had to pay. I am sorry, specifically, for the cost. Not for having tried, because I was trying with what I had, but for the difference between what I had and what you needed. You needed to be received. I am learning to receive. I do not know if it is too late for that to matter to you. I hope it is not. I am not asking you to tell me which it is. I am your mother, and you are my daughter, and whatever the distance between us is and however long it lasts, that is still true and will continue to be true. I love you, Addie. Mom, that is the letter. I mailed it 3 weeks ago. I do not know if she has received it. I do not know if she has read it. I do not know if it has changed anything. I know that it is the most honest thing I have written in my life, and that it is the first letter I have sent her in 6 years that I did not revise toward a specific hoped-for outcome. I know that my daughter is 34 years old and that she is living her life somewhere in Denver, or wherever she is living now, and that she is, according to Marcus, well, And I know that whatever she has built in the 6 years of distance, she built herself, and that I did not have a role in it. And I know that this is appropriate, and also that it is the specific grief of a mother who understands why she was not invited in. I know that 6 years is a very long time, and that I have used them. I do not know if I use them in time. Here is what I want to tell you, specifically and directly, because this story is not only a story about me and my daughter. It is a story about the specific, common, expensive mistake of confusing management with love. If you are a parent, I want to ask you to sit with one question. Not to manage the question toward a comfortable answer. To sit with it. When the people you love bring you the true texture of their experience, do you receive it? Or do you organize it toward resolution? Because the difference between those two things is everything. The difference is felt by the person on the other side of you. They feel it whether you feel it or not. And eventually, if the difference persists long enough, they name it. And the naming will tell you something that you have been communicating without words for a very long time. I am 61 years old. I have been in therapy for 6 years. I have been learning, slowly and with considerable resistance, to receive rather than manage. I do not know if it is too late. I am not managing toward any particular answer to that question. I am simply trying to be someone who, if her daughter calls, is capable of doing what she should have done when her daughter was 6 years old and bringing her things that deserve to be received. That is my story. 28 years of managing, 6 years of distance, a letter mailed 3 weeks ago, and the specific patient work of learning to be a person my daughter might someday want to know. If this reminded you of a relationship where someone needed to be received and was managed instead, I want to hear from you. Drop it in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to understand the difference between those two things. Hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.